Well, it's not a question of whether you lived in Atlantis, it's a question of when. Who was I? What family was I? What clan did I belong to? What periods of Atlantean history did I appear in, or in which did I appear? Yeah. So you want to find out your clan and family in the Atlantean age. It's fun, it's easy, and of course it's free. Who was I? To which clan did I belong? What was my favorite cult? What was my favorite god or goddess? How did I earn my livelihood? What did I achieve in ancient lives? Where did I live? What did I wear? What did I eat? How did I care for my young? What education existed then? What sports? What games? What drugs? What sex was I? What did I do with it? How many children and grandkids did I have? In which lifetime? Can I trace my steps through the Atlantean civilization? You're at a psychic fair, or a Celtic festival, or a craft fair, possibly even in the sense of fair of the wise. And you see this booth, which proclaims it as the Atlantean Society. So you walk over, and you're shown exactly how to trace your ancestry and existence in Atlantis over 14,600 years ago. You can find out about your lifetimes, your genealogy, your life charts, your contributions, your achievements within the framework of the Atlantean kingdom from about 40,000 BC until the Second Great Deluge in 12,440 BC, as near as I can determine, which is the flood of the Sumerians and the Old Testament. Now, just so we're clear about this, you don't have to do this at a craft fair, or you can do it at a Zoom fair, which is what we run. So let's talk more about the Great Flood. The first Great Deluge, see there were two of them, began slowly as the sea level rose just a little at a time. The second Great Deluge was caused apparently by a rift in the land connecting two bodies of water. I'm not entirely sure if anyone knows exactly what happened or how, but it did. And we're the result of that great disaster, among the many great disasters that have happened along the way on Earth's fairly short history, only 4.5 billion years and counting. Now, how do I know that Atlantis is below the present sea level? Suppose it wasn't lower, but higher in ancient times. Well, there are hundreds of sunken cities below the waterline, many of them built in monolithic style, great blocks of dressed stone weighing in at megatons apiece, laid out for anywhere from a few hundred yards up to 4 continuous miles of buildings along an ancient seacoast, down now in the water. There's lots of evidence piling up as humans start investigating their own planet, about which they know less than they know about the moon. Most people assume that Atlantis was a city located on a lost continent or an island that sank into the sea as a result of a giant earthquake. But Atlantis, the empire, was actually a network of tribute kingdoms and a central government at the city Karzakh, a port city on a wide basin of what was then dry ground. It had a unique circular harbor that had several defensive levees set up around several consecutive perimeters of levees. Atlantis as an empire was never at war after the second period of the Middle Kingdom, about 24,883 BC. Atlantis had many remote settlements and entire countries that were under its dominion, actually colonies rather than tributaries, in much the same way that England had its empire and commonwealth, and Japan had its co-prosperity sphere, and Russia, assembled by conquest its version, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, a wild misnomer if ever there was one. Pardon me. So with the deft twist of a dial on a cell phone, you can find your main family and clan in the ancient world during the Atlantean period, predating all known historic records. Atlantis started as a small seafaring community somewhere off the present coast of Spain, but well within the coastline of the ancient world, when the sea level was much lower. The ancient seaports are today sunken under many fathoms of water, but are quite accessible to divers. Hundreds of ancient cities, which now lie underwater due to the rise in sea level at the melting of the glaciers and polar cap ice flows, more ancient cities lie underwater than on dry land. If you could find a map of the coastlines of the world before the Great Glacial Meltdown sometime in 12,440 BC, you could note the easy targets for populations, the natural harbors, bays, inlets, and natural barrier reefs, and other refuges from crashing surf that were at that time right on the edge of the waterline. In short, look for the ports and harbors that were at sea level at that time, and that's where you'll find the evidence of lost civilizations plus tons of gold, more than you could believe possible. Atlantis in the beginning was a city-state, and for a long time, from about 44,000 BC until about 24,000 BC, it remained a city-state among other similar city-states with a very large human population worldwide, with many colonies, tributaries around the globe, including the pre-ice continent of Antarctica, a state into which it is again due to return. You'll find more and more Atlantean civilization tablets and stones as divers are able and willing and motivated to dive down into the ocean to explore these ancient ruins. Imagine building such ruins deep in the ocean on the ocean floor, hauling 150-ton blocks of neatly dressed stones underwater, placing them and doing all the things you do with buildings all underwater. Can you imagine doing that even with modern diving gear? Sure, maybe one such underwater town is possible, maybe even a few, but not hundreds of underwater monolithic structures and thousands of underwater towns and villages. So there's your proof, if you need it, that the water level was once about 200 feet lower than it is now. How large were the cities of Atlantis? Very large. Seeing the crowds in New Delhi, New York, London, Tokyo, and Chicago, with a little practice, I'll bet you could estimate the size of the town's population with just a momentary glance at the compression and pressure of the crowd. My best guess for the major cities is about 50,000 to 300,000 for the biggest, the empire's capital city, Karzakh, located at its major port. Estimating the entire population of Atlantis Empire, with all its tributaries and colonies and hegemonies, would be a wild guess, but I'll say that it was a total of several million worldwide, about the same as the citizen population of first century ancient Rome, if you didn't count the slaves and freemen, which I never did and still don't, and neither should you if the word of God is anything to go by. So the Atlantis city-state, the early period was Asarpadem dynasty from 43,874 to 43,545 BC. Those were clan wars, basically, largely clan wars. The Ashurbanipal dynasty, which started in 43,545 BC and went to 38,864 BC, was the Bronze Age settlements, the period of Bronze Age settlements. Those were the beehive houses at that time. Then there was the warring states, interregnum, collapse of trade routes, and that was at 38,864. And then Ashur-Banipal is 854, 10 years later, to 24,104 BC, to 24,036 BC was the pacification period. Then we have the middle period. That's the Kardesh-Mem dynasty. That's from 24,036 to 22,877 BC. That's the southern expansion that you read about quite a bit. Then Thutmose dynasty, 877 to about 22,574. That was its expansion into what is now known as Indonesia and Asia. And then the Ankh-Mose Shem dynasty, 22,574 to 22,224 BC. That's the restoration of the crown. And then there's the regency of Ut. And there's unknown dates there because that's a warring states period, loss of some colonies, addition of other colonies, rather unclear period there of history. Then the late period before the First Kingdom was the Temma'a dynasty from 22,224 to 22,003 BC. That's airplanes, hot air balloons. And the Amemsa dynasty, 22,003 to 22,724. That's the age of the first colonies in Central America. Then you have the She-Namsa, the vice regency, Again, those are plague years, and so unknown dates. Then the Koresh Namsa vice regent, unknown dates, plague years again. Then we have the First Kingdom. Now, the First Kingdom starts with Tefnah Nephra. That's 21,221 to 20,200 BC. That's the rise of the triad and crystal technology. So that you know so much. I mean, you read so much about the crystal technology of Atlantis. That's when that rose. Then came the Emnasheh, 20,200 to 19,080 BC. That's the first triad tower was made into a temple at that time. And then the rule of Khamentosa, 19,080 to 19,020 BC, not a very long reign. That was the first use of the Stargate technology. And then came the reign of Epnemose from 19,020 to 18,723 BC. The colony was established on Mars at that time. And Musa-Naram, 18,723 to 17,874 BC. That was the Raxical Star Drive and the Stargate Tech Highborns, which you read about a lot. Then the Second Kingdom, which is Shura Memtosa, 17,874 to 16,221 BC. That's the robot and nanotechs development stage. And then during the reign of Ankh-Shamose, 221 to 1540 BC is, of course, the golden age of radio. And then Dadur Ankara, that's 15,040 to 14,974 BC. That's the golden age of Atlantean television. And you can still pick up some signals that are knocking around in the stratosphere, in the ionosphere once in a while. Debnebra Mecher, 14,974 to 14,884. And he invented great harmonization, which is that racial harmonization that they achieved. And then Empire Atlantis, of course, which is the Snodaneth dynasty, everybody knows. That's the 14,884 to 14,224 BC. That's contact with telepathic off-world aliens. The Amosat dynasty, 14,224 to 14,074 BC, was the development of longevity and immortality. Didn't go very far. Then there's the Josad dynasty from 14,074 to 14,000 BC. Great period of prosperity and power, we know, because we read mostly about that. And then the Khufu dynasty, which nobody seems to know anything about, that's 14,000 to 12,443. That's the second flood and the total inundation below sea level. That's the actual kingdom that was lost at that time, the empire that was lost. The Atlantean colonies that survived the second flood on the western rim of modern Sicily, several colonies placed them up, was then the highlands, survived the flood and are now on or near the present seacoast, along with several colonies set up in North Africa on the grasslands to the west of the River Nile in the direction of two colonial governors, Horus and Set. So there's a lot more that you can find out about that, of course, by going over to the Atlantean-Society.com and look at all of those freebies that we have posted there, because why shouldn't they be free? We don't need your money. We don't want your money. You keep your money. So join us and have a very, very refreshing day, remembering your past lives. And it won't hurt you to do that. They don't all come hit you at once. It's little at a time. It comes back to you, including some of your former skills and all kinds of things. I recommend it highly.